Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning,
morning.
gentlemen.
Good morning, Seth, and your wonderful smile. God, I love it because it just brightens up my morning.
Does it warm the cockles of your heart?
Warms my soul. I don't know if you could feel it in the audio, his smile just beaming through. If you're running right now,
soul.
you hear the audio coming, you're just like, I'm getting happy. I don't know why.
You know, Tommy, rather than being someone that shares my smile all the time, where it's meaningless, I reserve it for very special occasions, and I think it just means more.
I just want to know what it's like to be that positive all the time.
You'll never know. You'll never know because there's this sheen, this face that is just plaster most of the time, and most people think I'm really upset inside. Sometimes I am, but sometimes it's not always the case. But you don't know. At least I always look angry, I guess.
Consistent. I'll say that you're consistent.
It took me 50 episodes to go, I think what I said he's okay with, and he's not pissed at. So
that's funny.
Always keeps you interested. Keeps you on your toes, Tommy.
Keeps you on your toes. Jumping in today, we have a really good topic for today. We're gonna have a mailbag today talking about Power BI self-service and thinking about personalization. We have a question on this one today, so we'll address that question. Seth will do his mailbag voice, and we will read our question today and go through just kind of some topics around leveraging PowerBI.com, using personalization, and seeing how that works for self-service items. With that being said, we have a couple news items here. A lot of things have come out recently. Tommy, you've been quite busy on the blogging front a little bit here. Prompting BI has put out a diagramming for DAX with generative AI. Tommy, you want to give us a little bit of a round out? What does this mean?
Yeah, so this was actually a conversation we had either this Tuesday or last week, and you're like, hey, you should write an article about that. I said, hey, I did. And the idea is this: everyone knows the chat GPTs and those generative AI skills on chat-based and text-based queries and back and forth, but they've really improved on the visual ability to evaluate and understand a visual, not just the diagram or whatever visual that you have. Say, what is this? Spit back what it is, but also the text in it and really what you're trying to do. So we applied this to generative AI needs context. And usually if you're trying to ever get a DAX formula or DAX answer from ChatGPT, it's always a little wanting because you're dealing with your own evaluation context. So what we actually just went through in the article was, well, let's feed it the model. And we've actually fed it just a view of the diagram. Well, and we break it down. I don't want AI to do anything more than that. I basically say, hey, look at the diagram, look at my model. Here are my measures. Don't do anything else except evaluate it. I don't want you to go further than this. AI wants to do more, but really the idea is let's just do a step at a time. From there, I actually gave it my visuals, the data visualizations, and I broke it down in boxes saying, hey, a user's going to click on this column chart. When that happens, I want this to occur. And I want this to occur in figure 3. I want a DAX measure that's going to achieve this. And breaking it down, and really maybe I had 2 chat messages to ChatGPT and 2 images. But it's the images that really shine through and shows what ChatGPT and a lot of these tools can do.
Interesting. Let me throw out the link to the article as well, just to make sure we have that post here as well for everyone in the chat window. So for chat, if you want to go read about how Tommy used ChatGPT, and it was correct, that was ChatGPT to render this one. So if you want to learn how to use ChatGPT in order to produce some DAX and have it produce a DAX measure for you that was giving you topics counted inside this model that you're talking about, you can go check out the article here. It's in the chat window. What I hear coming out of this conversation is now not only is Microsoft going to get feature requests from users, actual users, they're not going to get feature requests from AI. That's going to be like, can you change your diagram view to be a bit clearer about these arrows and relationships so I can understand which tables are linking to which columns in the different diagrams? Like, this is interesting.
And it's so much more straightforward to actually send it the image and telling it it's a semantic model. Because that's what I told ChatGPT. I told it's a semantic model, evaluate the relationships, tell me what you get out of this. And it told me about the relationships. It told me about the one-to-many, told me about what you can do with this. That's to what I wanted.
Is image processing heavier to do in ChatGPT than it is text processing?
Yeah, I mean it's more tokens, but it's still really fast, especially if you have like.
I mean, in general, it would be.
Yeah,
in general processing.
Okay,
in general.
Now with this is intriguing. Like I love what you put together here because it opens the door, I think, to a lot of ways in which you could run into challenges on a report page, right? And what you outline here is like, hey, yeah, just throw in the model, give it context, and then the visual with some explanation of what you're trying to do. That's cool that it actually worked, man. That's a cool use case.
I like the use case. I'm just a little torn on how to get to the answer that it produced. It feels. I'm not sure Microsoft. I'm trying to think of like big picture here a little bit. I'm stepping back up a little bit, right? Throwing images at an AI to interpret what relationships are on a model. It feels like the model just needs to give us better information about what the relationships are, and I can send it an actual like here's a text image that
I tried that,
corresponds all your relationships. Like, why did the image work so much better than?
Well, in this way, you wanted different behaviors in the visuals, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly. Didn't just want someone just to click on something to filter, but I wanted how the behavior of the visual to say things that were related. But I see what you're saying, Mike. Why can't I just feed it, in a sense, a computer read of the relationships from like a BIM file?
Yeah, here's my BIM
file.
file. I don't know. Like this is where I'm struggling a little bit. Is like I don't know what AI needs to make the answers that I want, and I feel like sometimes we throw it too much, and maybe that's not the right approach.
Exactly. So if I feed it a BIM file, or if I feed it extra information,
is it confused?
It doesn't get confused. It's just going to try to evaluate all of it. You know,
true. And it's very your BIM file is going to be big. It's not going to be like the relationships you need, right?
And and it's important with all these tools that
interesting.
You like one of the things I mentioned in the article is I'm segmenting and I'm explicitly telling AI or the generative AI, look at the model, evaluate it, but don't do anything else. Don't try to do anything else. Let's stop here. Let's make sure. And I have more tables in that model, but I don't need to feed it.
Yes, because they're not related to what you're trying to build relationship wise.
Exactly.
And I would guess that
interesting.
You could articulate the same thing in text. It's just challenging, right? As opposed to
I don't want to
provide context and the visual to do these things. And to this point though, it does open the thoughts to like what other things could you auto generate, right? Like from the standpoint that I want to create, like, here's my model, here's what these pages need to do, right? Can you answer this question here, like, and lay out an auto set of here's the measures you need, here's the visualization that you want to create, you know, or automatically do that. I think there's definitely opportunity here if it can understand, you know, the set of what you're already showing it and the interactions that you want it to have. It would seem like you could build that experience or build the framework for the AI to work within that.
And the image evaluation and understanding is scary good. It's scary good. So I feel like,
by the way, cool stuff, Tommy. Good article. I like it.
All right, moving on. Tommy, with that, just a secondary article that we probably won't dive in as deeply on. But Tommy's also putting out some other prompting things around prompting BI things as well. So just getting started, right? Here's a getting started page. If you are interested in using ChatGPT or other, I guess would be AIs, right? How do you start prompting it? What kind of information do you give it? And I'm learning it's not just a one and done. You don't just give it a single prompt and say, you get your answer you want. It's not like a Googled search like I think I used to be experiencing. It's more of you've got to frame it the context. And I think to your point, Tommy, you're learning like you have to tell it what you want or the expectation output potentially. So you might be putting a couple more words into it, but it can do more with the information you're giving it. So
And just a quick touch on that. The other article really goes into that on what does AI need. The context is key, and then we actually have a full system message that you could do for if you were doing a transcript.
Cool.
So pretty cool.
Excellent. I see other people on the chat here are using Copilot to script out macros in Tabular Editor. That looks like another opportunity for things there as well. So that's pretty cool. Anyways,
that's an excellent idea.
That's a great idea. So another good solution there.
You're not great at C#.
I'm not.
No,
I can't know everything. Let's quickly jump into a couple news articles that came out from Microsoft. There's a couple new new Data Factory connectors released in Q3 2024. We have a couple new connectors for Salesforce, Azure SQL, Azure MySQL, right? MySQL DB. We've got a couple other ones. Any other items here on this article, Tommy, that you kind of found that were interesting?
I think the Salesforce one is going to be pretty big because I have a ton of clients who are using Salesforce.
That's a big catch-up one.
That's a really significant one.
Yeah.
It's very pleasing to see that one come out now because that's a big move. That's a big item. Yeah, I agree with that one a lot.
Yeah, I would imagine the vast majority of folks using Azure Data Factory have some connectors to the existing Salesforce. So that I think is one of the big ones that I'm very, very happy to see has moved into, or the capability is now in the Fabric Data Factory.
It's going to be used more in lakehouses and I think semantic models because everyone I know uses Salesforce. It's not in the best format, or there's a lot of transformations that need to be done. So the fact that you can
welcome to every operational system ever.
Right.
It's made for that system. It's not made for reporting, and you got to shape a lot of data to get it the way you want it to go. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
I think one of the challenges, the larger challenges with systems that we've run into with Salesforce is when it's more business team led and without architect or data architecture understanding. And it fast spirals into, there's an object with 300 columns in it. How many of those are still used, right? Like it gets ugly really quickly, and those systems can, and they're a real challenge, or have been in the past, to connect and make sense of a lot of the information. But the connector, if it works the same, we've actually found that recently, that you can, hot take. Previously, we were connecting to objects, right? And within the object, you can write a SQL query that will connect to, Salesforce, pull the data back. But what I didn't know is there's kind of like a schema definition that allows you to drive down into the relationships of other tables. Whereas previously we'd pull in all the objects from account or
all the tables,
community, right?
Yeah, and then you rebind them together.
Just learned recently is if you're connected to the account table and there's a relationship that dives into all of these other links and relationships, it's almost like a schema driven, like account, but parent, whatever, and then actually pull through instead of having to pull in the object. And I just learned that. And I was like, get out.
Very interesting.
I've been using this for forever. It's like I can go grab that related column from a different table through the same account object, which was very a very timely win for us.
Awesome. Well, good find. I don't work a ton with Salesforce data. I have some customers that use it, but we don't pull in a ton of data for it. So I don't probably have the same level of experience that you guys do on Salesforce specifically. I know how to connect to it and get some things out of it, but we haven't done a major project around loading all the data. So when I get one, I'll hit you up and ask for some questions around that.
We had hacks on data flows on data flows on data flows because we were basically trying to because it was all business. Oh yeah. All Gen 1. So
use all that compute.
Use
all the compute. The reporting will be down. You cannot render any reports. We're loading things from Salesforce. Please wait until 8 a.m.
What else does Data Factory have? They have a new Lakehouse connector, right?
We do. Yeah, Data Factory also came out with a Fabric Data Factory. The schema support for reading and writing data from Data Factory is now supported in the pipelines. So this is really interesting. Microsoft came out with schemas inside the Lakehouses for Fabric recently. I believe it's in preview, I think is what it is right now. And what that means is it's almost like, this is not the right way to say it, but I'm going to say it anyways. It's almost like a folder structure for a lakehouse. So if you have different domains or areas, data by customer, data by topic, data by bronze, silver, and gold, you can give a schema to the lakehouse, and then under that schema, you'll have tables. And so it just adds additional syntax into your queries or your Python notebooks, where you add not only just the name of the lakehouse and the table name, you now add the name of the schema and the table name. So it's like another layer deeper inside the schema pieces, which has been great. That's actually been around for a while. Microsoft is finally catching up to this one. So very pleased about the feature. And now Data Factory can write into the lakehouse with the schemas that you need, which is incredibly helpful. So definitely very pleased about this new feature. You'll notice some idiot already asked questions about this, but
Whoa.
Whoa.
It's Mike DiCarlo. That's
Mike. It's me.
Okay.
It was me. I'm already asking questions about it. So I really like schemas in Lakehouse. It's a very useful feature, very well and timely. So very happy with that feature. My gripe here is I can't yet connect a SQL Analytics endpoint to the Lakehouse with a schema in it. And I can't yet get a semantic model to work on top of that lakehouse with the schemas. It doesn't read the tables yet, which I understand why. Like, you got to build this feature first in the lakehouse, and then every other tool has to start talking to it correctly. But man, my hands are tied right now. I really want to start using the feature across my semantic models. That's really what I do. I use a pipeline, I make data in the lakehouse, and I take lakehouse data, I shape it, and I pull it right into a semantic model. That's what I do every time. That's the pattern. So get the semantic model reading the schema. I need that. So anyways, that's my only gripe. It's nothing to do with Data Factory at all. Very pleased that works, but I griped about something else, I think.
I'm curious if Microsoft were to look at their data and look at what the the final output of the most lake houses that are created are. Do you think that 90% are for semantic models, or do you think I imagine they're looking at Lakehouse as a ton of other use cases. It's not just the semantic model. I think you and I and the people who've been Power BI, that's very much the end goal. But I'm curious what that distribution is, because they're looking at Lakehouses as this is a medium point for a ton of other applications, not just semantic models. That's one of the elements here.
It's a good question, Tommy. What is the main consumption from the lakehouse? Like, what is the main tool that you're going from out of the lakehouse?
Right.
I feel like my argument is a semantic model, because everything I want to give to consumers is from the semantic model. Like, I'm not building paginated reports directly querying the lakehouse. I'm using some form of direct lake connector
so easy
to tables. What was that?
It's so easy to do. Now that I can connect to a Delta table with a paginated report.
Yes, you can, but that requires you to use paginated report builder on your desktop, right?
With the new service, I think.
I don't know about in the service. I've done it in the desktop.
Yes. Okay. So in desktop, I would agree with you. If you're using the desktop paginated report builder app, yes, you can do that one. I was just more thinking like I'm in the service trying to say, okay, what could I build in the service? Right. I really like this service. Like, that one is
only service experience.
I'm thinking service things. I'm doing more and more dev on the service side of things, but I haven't done performance testing on Lakehouse direct connections to the paginated report, which I gotta test that. That's one I should test out a little bit more. But my mental model is I've done this work to make a star schema. Why would I go back to the Lakehouse if I could have the related dimensions and facts? And then I could have my visual reports and my paginated reports all pointing to the same kind of stuff. Like, to me, that makes the most sense, because the semantic model is the definition of how my company runs. This is the business logic lives there. So I feel like that's my main consumption point. I do a lot of work right now with companies building data engineering pipelines. And so we do a ton of work looking at what's in those different bronze, silver tables. We're consuming data from APIs, or we're consuming data from third-party tools. Mm-hmm. And I'm doing a lot of engineering work in the Lakehouse. That's what I feel like I do a lot there. And it's a ton with notebooks. So it feels like notebooks is the way to go for working with data transformations inside the Lakehouse. I just showed someone Data Wrangler inside a notebook, and people's minds were blowing up. I was like, yep, it's here, and it just writes auto Python for you. the same way that Power Data Flows writes M for you. It's the same kind of concept. I was like, this is brilliant. It's really good.
Yeah.
Anyways, good stuff.
It's funny, earlier when you started this, Tommy, and said if Microsoft would look at their data, I thought you were going to go in a completely different direction.
Oh,
because we were talking about the articles and Mike DiCarlo and all of them. Like, would they see Mike Carlo poking us all the time in our articles?
They look at their data. They would say, "This guy whines a lot." He's not
of Data Flows Gen 2. How many times?
These are just helpful suggestions.
I feel, and they are exactly.
They are.
Well,
they are.
I feel like we're on the edge of a. This is. Yeah. I'm seeing the vision of where they're going. I see where they're going to land this stuff, and I absolutely love it. Like the things that they're building are stuff that I really want to use, and they're making really solid improvements on very specific parts of the tool all over the place. But there's so many different teams working on all the different parts.
Yeah.
It feels like we're not able to get everything released at the same time. I would feel like, okay, if we're going to release schemas in lakehouses, let's make sure our semantic models can consume that like right away. That would be like a coordinated feature release. But I get that you can't do that across, I don't know how many teams there are, like 10, 15, 20, 80 teams. I don't know. All the teams to make sure that everyone's releasing the same thing at the same time. They've all got different priorities. Someone's fixing bugs in semantic models and you're not ready to release the schema stuff yet. We've got to do more testing on that. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
It's just, I want to, in 6 months, this is going to be incredible.
Yeah. Everything right now. Yeah. The problem right now is in their technology that they're producing, we would have to change our processes that we've already had in place in order to work with what they have, rather than we can just include this.
Correct. So anyways, that's just kind of my initial thought there on that one. I think we are about at time and we should probably stop doing news articles. So a lot of good things coming out. We're very pleased. Microsoft Fabric Conference is coming up here pretty soon. So there is a Fabric Conference in Europe, which I believe will be happening here in the next couple of weeks, the end of September. So stay tuned. There's probably going to be a bunch more announcements coming out at the big event. There's going to be new announcements and things that are coming out there. So kind of listen. And then I believe behind that is Ignite. Ignite is coming out in November, I believe. And so in November, you'll have probably more announcements about things coming out in the future. So stay tuned. Keep up with all the additional events that are coming out, and we'll give you reports as we learn about things as well. With that, let's go ahead and jump right into our main topic today then.
Mailbag.
That's what we're at.
Mailbag. All right. Today's mailbag. Power BI self-service. Personalization. I think this is a game changer, but I rarely hear it talked about on podcasts or anywhere else. What are your thoughts on rolling out personalization for self-service to the business to help them consume data without having to be a report developer? Is personalization difficult to implement from an IT perspective? I have seen it succeed and would like to implement it at my new company. Thanks. Thank you.
Well, this podcast talks about it. We're all up in that personalization.
That's actually why I chose the episode. The mailbag question.
Did you?
Yeah, because I said no one else talks about it. Like, not yet or not anymore.
Your only episode talking about personalization in PowerBI.com. New advertisement. All right, so let's maybe pick apart some of the questions here. I guess there are two parts that are coming through here. Is what are your thoughts on rolling out personalization for self-service? And then is it difficult? Is personalization difficult to implement from an IT perspective? I think those are the two main questions, and we can kind of like maybe react from there. First reaction, yes. And second answer to the question, no. Okay, you're good. Move on. Yes, implement it. No, it's not hard to implement. So I think it's definitely a training exercise on users in the service to make sure they understand how to additionally adjust the visuals. I don't think the little icons on top of the visual are very self-discoverable, and it's a little hard to understand what you're doing there. So I think it's very intentional. You have to be clear about what you can do to the visuals and how, like, you have to train people on this. This is something they have to know how to do to change the visuals.
I'm going to take a pretty different route than your take on this, because you're right. The IT side of this and the implementation, easy,
not.
especially the personalized visuals and even the
Yeah.
training.
It's literally isn't it just a setting in the report, like allow people to personalize visuals, and then you can just do it, right? So the setup of it is
you're
relative
done.
easy.
You're
Per
done.
report. Each report can be turned on or off with personalization or not.
Right. And you're done after that. So the problem is, and this is my take on this, is I don't know if people want to. I have tried immensely when I worked internally as a director of BI, from being a consultant now on pushing this. And we've never seen a ton of traction. Some of this we can get in the audit log. Some of this we get from feedback surveys. Some of this we just get from people. People know it's there, but they don't want to use it.
Yep.
Or they're more adverse to using that, even with training, even with directly talking to, from a micro point of view, a subset of people, not necessarily the whole organization. And I'll take that a step further. You mentioned the personalization on a visual, but I think there's the other element of quickly creating a report in the service off of a semantic model, giving that ability.
That's a different question, I think, and I don't think that the reader is actually asking that question.
So we're just on personalized visuals.
Yeah, self-service. Let me just read it again. What are your thoughts on personalization for self-service? So I'm interpreting the question. I could be wrong on this one.
Yeah.
Just to be very clear. I'm interpreting this as this is the ability to click on a visual in a pre-existing report, and then, oh, I don't like all these columns. I'm going to add a new column. I'm going to add, no, I don't want this measure. I don't want some of this. I want the sum of that. And so you're basically going into the visual and you're switching the properties or basically the data fields on the single visual. You could even change it from, oh, this is a bar chart. I'd rather see it as a table.
So yeah, let's keep it in that realm then.
That's the concept I'm thinking of. And I think you're right, Tommy. There is an extension of this idea is, okay, how much freedom do we give our users to go build their own self-service reports or their self-service paginate? Like, do I share the app with pre-built content in it and then you can personalize the visuals, or do I share you a model and let you build your own stuff? Like,
so yeah,
I want to focus, I think, more on just the report side for now. And maybe if we have time at the end, we can talk about the other half of self-service.
Would you also intake what if parameters in the field parameters as part of self-service here? The ability, so when I can choose measures and basically change the visual that way as well. I would put that in the same topic. That the feature that came out about a year and a half.
That's more. I would say it's more of an explicit implementation.
Yeah,
similar, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think, to Mike's point, though, right? Maybe it's a subset of, if we're talking about personalized visuals, the feature that Microsoft has that you can enable.
Yeah.
Like, that would be another way personalization could be implemented for end users.
Yeah. So,
I want to go back to your question, Tommy. So would I consider an if statement? So,
or just the field parameters
observationally, let me just, as an observation, let me say where I think most people customize existing reports, right? I think I observe the most questions around, let me say it this way, reformulating my statement here. Many people, when looking at a report, I need access to data. Just give me the information. We a lot of times put it in charts and visuals to kind of say, look, we're trying to pre-build or give you an eye to what the data should look like. A lot of reports, typically, that I've observed, have, when you're starting out the beginning in visualizations or reporting with Power BI, you start with these really large, wide tables with lots of columns. People love a matrix, a pivot table. That does a lot of things for them. But it's very difficult to kind of sift through all that information and find the impactful information that you want to go do something with, right? So what I find is we have to kind of bring a story along with our data a little bit and say, look, here's some visuals that are showing key insights, and then helping you drill into a specific area. Okay, this category, this region, this product is not selling as well as we want to. The question really is not how. I think it's like I'm looking for the voids in my data. Where's the area that is missing information, or where's the area that's not doing what I expected? How do I highlight that and get you down to a table of data that supports that information? So if I'm thinking about that, most requests are, you have a bunch of visuals, I need to see the table form of that data. So from a personalization standpoint, I think I see people wanting, or the need is, take that bar chart, turn it into a table, and that's how I want to see it. I just want to see it as a table. I don't need to see the bar chart. It's not helpful enough to really provide insights what they're looking for. So I think the personalization works really well when you have a visual-based report. I want you to start thinking visually initially, and then translating that over to, oh, I don't really want all these visuals. I want 2 tables and a couple visuals, right? Then the user can decide on which way they want it. And I believe bookmarks will save that state of the way things are. So you could switch the personal visualization, create a bookmark of that standpoint. And that way, when you reenact the bookmark, or when you go back to that report page, I think the bookmark will keep that customization of that personalized visual. And so my mental model is thinking in that regard, is thinking, I have visuals, I'm trying to switch them to a table. That's where I think the real value comes from. The reason I bring this up is, to your point, Tommy, other things that don't require you to be report builders, you're adding additional features like a slicer that has multiple measures on it. Pick these different types of aggregations, and that changes how the behavior on the rest of the page works. Totally understand it. I don't think I hear as many people asking for that kind of information. Right. It feels to me like when we have different data calculations, for me, it's very jarring to have one visual doing sum of sales, but all the other visuals doing something different. I don't make the context transition very well between the different visuals when I start switching the measures of things, unless it's one entire page where everything switches at once. So I feel like I'm building more pages for that kind of stuff, saying, okay, we're going to focus on, visits on web pages. This is the visits page. And then, okay, let's drill into the purchasing page. How many of those visits turned into purchases? Like things like that. I'm trying to craft a bigger story, and I'm centering an entire page around a topical piece of information. I don't know. I'm just going to put that there.
I think that's perfect. And like I said, the only reason I mentioned is because field parameters, I could also change the fields, not just the measures now too, which is kind of like that personalized visuals. I can say show by date or show by campaign. But yeah, so I think that's a good kind of scope. I think what we have for just focusing on this personalized sites, which again, I don't know if it's an adoption problem.
Specific to the report page, though. What value do you think this provides end users? Let's just assume everybody knows how to use it, right? That they can like change and modify and set their bookmarks. Is this experience more valuable than, Mike, what you were outlining, which is where report developers customizing or catering and building report pages for specific purposes to answer questions, specifically? Does this open a broader spectrum of how folks can analyze data on a page?
I think
it does.
Yeah, good.
Go ahead, Tommy. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
So I think there's the assumption and the reality. The assumption is, of course, this does, because someone can go in and interactively change, like, hey, I'm looking at, our clicks by month, but what if I want to look at our actual number of conversions? And I can quickly do that. I can do that on the fly. That's the assumption.
That's not an assumption. That's reality. That's what you can do.
That is what you can do. But the assumption was saying is people want to do that, or people are going to be intuitively comfortable with doing that.
Yeah. And I think that is part of this conversation, but specific about the value, the feature allows people to do that. Right.
Interesting.
100%. 100%. But
go ahead.
No, but I was going to say, do you get a lot of engagement? Go ahead.
I want to add to your point, Tommy, because I think you made a good point there. But I think if I take a thought up of, I'm going to take a step ahead above what we're talking about, right? So we're talking about changing the single visual. I think the concept here is users are trying to extend the list of questions they're asking against the report page. That's what this is trying to do. I feel like I'm looking at this visual and I see sales over time. Okay, you understand that chart now. What do I want to do next? There's another step. There's another insight. Okay, I understand sales over time, but which category had the highest sales? Look, we have a spike here, or we have a dip here. Which category is now producing that dip of what would I expect in the chart? And what I'm trying to think of is, okay, how do I get to that answer So I take that existing visual, click on personalization, and I add some categories to it around product or category. So now I can start, diving deeper or asking a separate question. So this is where I think we have a challenge as report developers. We start building a report with a set list of questions. We're going to build these insights into this report or this page or whatever. We're trying to handle as many of the common questions as possible. I think personalization allows the user of the report to expand their question library to a larger amount and ask additional questions that maybe the report author didn't initially think of.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what that's trying to do. It's letting you extend the question spectrum to ask more questions against what the data is doing there.
Right.
I think this gets very tricky because as soon as you start allowing that, I mean, yes, you can allow it. Not saying you don't do it. But how do I know as a report developer what all the questions will be asked? How do I know which visuals are the best visuals to be put in place here? Do we need an additional page
you
of information? I don't know.
This suggests that you don't need to, because the business user would be able to select the different visual or the different thing.
Great point.
And I guess that leads into my second question. If the value is there in the feature, what is the challenges that we're facing, or why don't we see tons of it? Or why, like as the mailbag question is, why is nobody talking about it?
I'll take it from someone who actually really tried internally to push this. When I was inside, and I think there's two elements here. There's really two factors. One, we did one of our early episodes. We did. Mike, do you remember the mental models or the mental misconceptions we did? And one of them was like if you have 2 cans of jam to choose from or 15 cans of jams to choose from, it's harder when you have unlimited options to make a decision. So with a personalized visual, not only can you choose all of the fields in semantic model and all of the visuals, you have unlimited options for a user, which makes it much harder to say where they want to go. And I think the other element here, which really is a barrier to adoption, is it's not for everyone. I think there's part needing that analytical mind, and also to be much more familiar than we assume with the model itself. If I'm a user, and I'll say a basic user, the average user, I'm not saying I'm a BI developer. I'm not saying I've never touched Power BI. I'm right in the middle. I'm going to click on this button and I'm going to see 18 visuals. And I'm going to see, hopefully I've cleaned my semantic model so it doesn't show all the fields and all of these options available to me. I don't know necessarily what a stims and facts are. I don't necessarily know to look for a calculator icon. Even if I've done the training, if I have 20 measures, where do you start? Unless I have that mind. And if I have that mind, I'm probably in BI.
But it's not even the mind, right? And I think there are two main reasons why there are challenges with rolling this out. And then there's one prior, and I'll get to that after this. But like the first is, I think personalization works very well with well thought out, robust models that are implemented.
I was going to go there. Yep, I love that.
But it puts the onus of crafting the data story on the end user. Right? Because we're not building pages to answer questions or lay out the visuals in such a way that the cross filtering works. I can search and I can do these different things, but it is designed to answer this set of questions, because you're opening the doors to, it could answer many types of questions and be free flowing in analysis. So like I kind of feel the mailbag users probably one of these folks that analyzes a ton of data and loves the fact that they have this experience that they can draw upon. But that leads into the second point, that in order for this to work, it definitely speaks to a very robust data culture where people know, Tommy, like you were saying, what a measure is, the fields that they can select, the ways in which they want to visualize the information, because they have that as part of their lexicon of like, oh, I love this analysis. Oh, I'd love to see this in a bar chart. Oh man, like I want to see this in what is the trend on the, like that is a data mind, right? That's someone who understands data and may not be building the report page, but certainly understands how they would. And this is just that interface or that unique experience where maybe analysts thrive, and that's what they're pushing and saying personalization would be great for analysts analysis.
Right.
But that kind of goes to the first point, which is, okay, this is a very well thought out, well constructed model that supports large areas of the business that it makes sense to. And I think those are two of the biggest things of why there are challenges with like just throwing this out into the ether, because if we're already talking about like where's the button or how do I do that functionality wise, I mean, you got a ways to go.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. Two of your points, Seth, were both of my points I had written down here earlier. If the model is over complex, people are not going to know how to get pieces out of it. Now, you can build perspectives. Perspectives can help you limit the amount of fields that you would want in the visual. And I do think if you're going to build personalization from an IT weight standpoint, you for sure should do that. The more you can remove additional columns or measures or things that don't make sense on that visual, simplify. Because then people will be able to have less learning curve to get into the model. I'm fully aware that every model can't be just a simple star schema, and we start doing snowflaking and we do special cases and the data's not designed right. And so we get these models that are much more challenging to work with because the way we want to construct the data for that single visual to work, we may have 4 or 5 additional visual-based measures that are doing just visual things. Any time of like dynamic formatting, you want to have color stuff changing, you want to have titles on reports changing. Those are all measures. Those are all things that are part of the model that why would I bring a title measure that's changing the title of a visual to the visual itself? It doesn't make sense. So there's literally things in the model that do not make sense to put on that customized visual. So I think it's really important that you pare that down. Where I think personalization may take a turn here for me is where Carly was talking about a feature for, I can't remember the name of it. Metrics Hub? What was it called? I can't remember the name of it. So Carly has explained, here's a perspective. Here's the things I'm going to pluck out of my model. And I'm going to let you have this experience where I can go, here's main KPIs. I'll give you a subset of that. And you can build this perspective on top of the model and then create simple visuals. I also think inside PowerBI.com, the service, the Explorer visual, which is not really a visual, but it is, and it's like a report with a single visual and a table on it. It's interesting how it plays out, but I really like the Explorer visual or the Explorer report type, I guess that's what it's called, because you can literally build the table that you want. It's a matrix, and you get a single visual that represents the data. I think access to data and just poking around in the data to understand what's going on there, I think that's a really good use case. And honestly, I think that should be used more often. There should be an Explorer feature. The UI is great. You can add filters. You can do all these extra things, but you're literally making a table and looking at the information coming from a data model. I really like those two other options. And if we're talking personalization, I think those are going to be more valuable in the future when we start talking, here's a model that I built you, go have fun, go build stuff on top of it.
Mike, that deserved 2 exclamation points in my notes, what you just said. So I think the first point I want to touch on where you talked about the model, and I want to take that quickly a step further. It's not even just the model itself having a core, a really structured model. It's also having a user-friendly model. And I think perspectives are a big point there. Again, who thinks in DIMs and facts and measure tables and measures? You're not going to get people there. So
not everyone,
not everyone, unfortunately, as much as love
as much as I'd love you to think in that, it's a learning curve,
right?
But
right.
With enough exposure, people will get there. It's just, does your culture handle that?
And I think what you would push more to actually, if you want adoption, you're much more likely to get that if you're only dealing with core models. For example, if I'm working with a marketing team, we're using the same data over and over, and they're probably familiar with measures or clicks and open rate. And so they know that they can work with that. I'm not going to introduce personalized visuals with a completely new model and new data sets. Like, oh, now we're going to do this with our advertising until they're familiar with that. And we've built a ton there already. And that's something that withstands time in terms of something that we interact with together with BI and the team. Your point on Explorer, I got incredibly excited because I think V1 is personalized visuals, and I think V2 on where we're headed is that Explorer feature, because it's a entire window. The user interface, and let's talk user interface, man, because let's not understate the importance of, for a average user, the importance of a user interface. I have this entire window. I don't think Perspectives works with the Explorer. It's the entire model, or the model that's shown, but that's a way. I'm at the point now where I'm pushing people to Explorer than I am to personalize visuals. That's where I want people to go. I don't want them to go in the report because, again, for whatever reasons, that's a much harder or higher barrier to cross for people from a cognitive load, which is one of our things, just to get people to understand the visuals.
Totally agree
And
with
the
that one.
Explorer feature, I don't have the entire report out there. We're looking at the model, and it's much easier just to add a few columns. So if you were to ask me today, where are you pushing people to from a basic self-service? I'm pushing people to Explorer. I'm not pushing people to personalize visuals.
That's a good point. I think these are interesting points here. I think there's a lot of things that are coming down the pipeline of like that's going to make this easier to consume and easier to use these more rich features of the service, and particularly Power BI. Yeah, I agree with you, Tommy. I think there's other things that are out there that will also help with the learning, the education, the exploring the data pieces.
And I want to say, I hate the fact that people don't use personalized visuals because I love it. I use it on my own reports.
And I'm not going to walk my answer back, but I will say one thing that is a bit challenging. Today, if I'm going to make a perspective, that it requires a third-party tool. Mm-hmm. So when you're doing personalized visuals, when you're allowing people to turn that on, you can specify the perspective, but the perspective can't be made from Power BI Desktop. So I don't know when we're going to get something like that, but in order for this feature to be truly built into Power BI, I think you're going to need the ability for desktop or the PowerBI.com service. I don't really care which one. Somewhere you're going to need to say, this is my perspective. I'm going to be able to easily create the perspective with the tooling we have today. I'm not going to expect. So again, we're talking about IT burden here, right? Two major points of IT burden. One, are you going to turn it on? Design a model that's efficient. So you have to have those things. Those are, have to have that done. Then the next thing is we recommend you should use perspectives because it helps narrow down the list of fields you can use in the visual, and things that don't make sense shouldn't show up. But again, now you're in a third-party tool, more IT burden. So you have to really think about the customer experience of that visual and that model at a much higher level. And again, it just takes more of an expert to build the model. Not saying it's wrong, not saying it couldn't be done. Just be aware it's not currently built into the tool today.
Yeah, I think this leads me to my other point. Like, why don't we see tons of it? Because I could definitely think of use cases where you could craft a report, a page or a couple pages, and you could say, okay, in a traditional build, we're going to answer these questions, right? But that's one slice. If I change and personalize the visuals, now I would answer these questions. And, maybe it's even just saving the bookmarks or whatever the case may be, but like it's multi-layered in the approach and implementation to allow the business to do lots of things with one report. The challenge in there is if we're already having challenges with a single report page and end users understanding basic functionality, now you're switching contexts of answering questions in something that's not visual anymore, right? Like they have to innately understand all of the capabilities and be very comfortable using the tool set that I've provided them in that report page. And far and away, my experience has been the vast majority of business users are not in that realm. Now, could I say there are groups of analysts that would love a page like that, and maybe it'd be extremely useful, especially if they're power users in Power BI? Then I would say, yeah. Then I would say, okay, there's a use case here where I could literally open a page and create some areas where that would work well together from a high level. But even I think there are challenges from a technology implementation to say, okay, what would be the best set of visuals that are going to kind of work together regardless of how I look at or analyze this data, and that would be a challenge. But I think the largest part is just the end user education of data. The other things that are precursors to, I think, challenges of rolling it out, in my experience, the vast majority of time in model building and from centralized BI teams that are going to deploy an experience like this is the vast majority of time is filling gaps and insights in the business. Like, we're developing new models, data engineering. There's tons of time in just getting stuff to a place where people can see it and make decisions. And that's what we're designing and building for. There's not a ton of time, at least in my experience, for refining solutions or extending for this like deeper analysis. And that's probably just my industries that I've been engaged in, but it's or potentially like just the chaos that I love finding where you're constantly building, right?
Yes.
So we're not in a phase of, we have this, fantastic model. The vast majority of the business uses this. Let's look at different ways we can explore and extend into the business and say, oh man, we found this group of analysts. Let's now build this page that allows them way more insights than anybody else in the business would understand how to use. Then I think there are absolutely use cases for that.
So let's propose a situation or scenario for you. I'm going to give you guys, Mike, you got a client, Seth, you got your boss coming to you, say, hey, our Q4 goal is to get 20% of our 20% of report usage to use personalized visuals. Are you accepting that? And then two, what would be your your short-term plan to do that? Is that something you're going to go, yeah, I think I can achieve that?
My boss would never ask me to do that.
Fine. That's why it's called a scenario, hypothetical. Okay. So
I don't think anyone's asking for specific feature adoption inside your Power BI reports.
No, of course not.
Understand. I mean, just to throw that out there, this is a very hypothetical.
I'm sorry. We're in the alternate universe where feature usage internally matters a lot
towards my pay scale.
Yeah. We're in one of the multiverses.
20%.
Okay. How do I get there? What is the question?
Well, here, let me answer your question directly. So I understand why you're trying to ask this question, because you're trying to tie this something to like, does this make sense for us to spend effort on this? What's the value of the effort of this, right? I think what I would rather see is, I want to really measure the satisfaction of the users using the reports, right? I think the main goal of our organization should be, if I give you a report, are you able to get the things you need out of it? Either it's an export of data, or you're getting the insights that you want, or you're building the things that you need to on top of a semantic model, right? I think you have to listen very carefully to what the users are asking for when they come to you with questions about data. And you have to be very discerning around, okay, are you asking for a pre-built report that I can just go in and look at? Again, that might be just the culture of the company. You build it, we'll tell you the requirements, you just build what we need, and then we'll consume it. And we're not going to extend that experience any further than that. So if that's the culture that I'm in, where there's more of a centralized team and we're not expecting other people to create their own content, I think I would try to tie educational events around personalized visuals with, does this satisfy your needs? Like, is this report, so have a question box on the report, have a survey that we can send out very frequently. Are you getting more value out of your reports by using personalized visuals? And if not, then I would want to understand, why is this not working for your use cases? And it's potentially the data I don't need is in the report. The visuals don't make sense to me, and that's why I'm changing them. I just want more tables. Like, what is that satisfaction point that we're trying to get people to push through to make sure that if I'm a central team, how do I measure my value back to the people consuming the report? And so if I think I have to start the conversation there, and then I just use personalized visuals as part of the conversation. And if I'm putting reports out that have higher satisfaction when we're turning on personalized visuals, then I think I'm spending more time building perspectives, personalizing visuals, and doing more real demos, right? One of these things is that it's not a very discoverable feature. It's just not very much out there. So if I'm doing training on this on a SharePoint site or whatever, I'm going to very clearly explain this visual can be customized. Here's how you do it. Watch these steps. This is a function of that report. With that being said, all that does is it just makes the report more complicated at the end of the day. So, I don't know. Those are kind of my thoughts on it. I mean, I would try to push for satisfaction of consumption of reports. That's what I would push for with this feature.
The precursor context to all this, I'm trying to find a world where this would actually be, and there's actually a use case I think that is relevant to this one that we like could potentially be there, which is this a method by which individuals without a pro license could get access to like do more analysis on stuff?
Ooh,
because
interesting.
you don't want to pay for additional licenses where they would build reports and deploy them in an area. Odd case, but I'm just trying to I'm trying to answer Tommy's question. The other prerequisites to this would be all of my users are data savvy. All of my users know Power BI extremely well. And the request to the team is you're holding the business back because we don't have a model that everybody can explore and analyze in any way that they want, essentially, on this page. Go give that to them and make sure that it's adopted. Right. But you're still running into the challenges of like the only reason there would be business value is there because the business itself is saying you guys are restricting us from getting access in this specific format that we want called personalization. Your metric is 20% of all of our users better be using it by the end of Q4. Like, right. Okay, we can do that. Right. But that's a very niche use case. And one I would be astounded to see.
What I find really, really ironic about both your answers or what you both mentioned, Seth, you mentioned that in order to get this even started, the previous comment that you made was we need refinement. It's not just building and moving on. There's going to be a refinement period of the model. But then, Mike, you mentioned that it's just going to make the report more complicated. And so it's interesting to have those two things. And if we're going to ever refine a report or go back to it, the last thing we should do is make it more complicated for
refining a model means that everything within it makes sense and works together. Complicating the report page is what personalization will do to an end user. Those things absolutely live together.
But if I look at the complication of things, right? If I complicate the report consumption experience by allowing personalization, that is simpler than I would argue that is a simpler experience than giving someone a blank report page and say, go build something on a model. So like there's levels of complication we're talking about here. So that might be a good first step compared to here's a blank page, start everything from scratch.
But isn't that the Explorer view? Kind of, because you're building a single visual off the Explorer view.
It's a single visual, but it's not an entire report page. I think an entire report page has got a lot more things in it. I think this is a good conversation, but I do know we are kind of at time now, so I do kind of want to wrap up and give final thoughts here. So final thoughts on this one. I think your final thoughts here, Seth, that you're kind of pointing out here. I'm going to jump on those, right? I think you need to be very careful on how you're building out personalization. I think education is paramount. You're going to have to build a lot of examples of it. If you're going to use it everywhere, right? People got to get comfortable using this feature. Don't just do one random visual one-off and expect everyone to kind of use the feature if you aren't widely putting it across multiple models. I do think there's some burden on the IT organization or whoever's building the model builder. The model builder needs to understand how people are going to interact with that visual and the columns that are in your report. Build perspectives. So it's all a matter of perspective. Anyways, that's my final thought. Tommy, any final thoughts for you?
I think the biggest thing my takeaway from our conversation is this is a really neat feature, but it is a very also niche feature. This is not a global for everyone that we want to adopt. And I think the biggest takeaway is there's a lot of other ways we can provide to users a way for them to personalize and also to customize. I would not focus on this as kind of to your points, my end goal, my achievement of what I want the BI team to do or what we consider a success. So I think take a look at the different ways, know your models and know how your users are interacting with it. Those are my big takeaways.
Any final thoughts, Seth?
Yeah, I think personalization of visuals it can be extremely useful. Should it be available to individuals or analysts that know about it and want to leverage it? Yeah, absolutely. Right?
Mhm.
Is it hard for an IT team or a business intelligence team to develop a report page on a model fit? No, it's not hard at all. Right? Like they can do it pretty quickly.
Yes.
But I think overall, this feature is going to be driven more so from the business side,
I
and
agree.
you'll probably find more success when it is driven that way, as opposed to the opposite, where we're trying, like, could it be part of a data culture initiative and like level up people? Absolutely, it could. But I mean, there are a lot of basic stepping stones that just have to be fundamentally understood before you throw something like this out to a wider audience.
I really like that observation, and I agree 100%. It will probably gain more traction if the business is asking for this kind of stuff and you show them it's possible. That means the culture's already ready for the feature. I love it. Well, thank you very much for listening to the podcast. We really appreciate your time. We know your ears are busy and they're doing lots of things. So we thank you for spending an hour with us listening to our podcast. Our only request is please let someone else know or share this to somebody else that you think you might want to know about personalization of views. If this was a good conversation, talk about it with other people. Let them know you found this good information from the podcast. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple and Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. Do you have a question, an idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to powerbi.tips/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. Finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, and join the conversation on all of powerbi.tips social media channels.
Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.